Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about Paul Feig's Ghostbusters. Join me, won't you? So, in Ghostbusters, we meet Erin, a well-respected, nearly tenured professor who is doing her very best to bury her past as a paranormal explorer because such things would obviously discredit her in academia. Unfortunately, her old friend Abby has never quite given up on their dream to prove the existence of ghosts and all too quickly pulls Erin right back into such things, which, as it turns out, is quite good considering someone is quite nefariously trying to bring as many ghosts into our dimension as possible as to bring about the apocalypse, and as each ghost is brought over, there's only ever one team to call. Ghostbusters. Now, on a level that is rarely, if ever, achieved, this film has been pretty much universally panned by audiences months before its release, which, you know, if trailers are just so unfunny or are in some way seeming to disrespect a beloved property like the original 1984 Ghostbusters, then I guess I could see some validity in that film receiving a measure of flack. But gracious, it's gotten to the point now where it's not only uncool to like this film, it's actually cool not to. And I say all this because I just want us to pause for a second and really ask the only question that now matters, which is that film that we all thought we knew and kind of predetermined to hate as bad as we thought it would be? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, I have very much in the past enjoyed writer-director Paul Feig, he being responsible for the short-lived but brilliant Freaks and Geeks, as well as Bridesmaids, The Heat, and Spy. And the reason that I've enjoyed his past work so very much, sometimes even in spite of their kind of contrary, inaccurate marketing, was just their exploration of the real-life crud that we put up with every single day, from jealousy, to embarrassment, to sexism, to loss, to fear, and just how it's sometimes okay to laugh at the broken ways that we humans choose to deal with those problems. And with Ghostbusters, as it started out, I actually thought that that was the route that this film was going to take as well. It really felt like it wanted us to focus on Melissa McCarthy's Abby and Kristen Wiig's Erin and that pair's rediscovery of what it meant to be friends and the importance of that bond, and I love that. The first few scenes doing a really solid job of teeing up that idea. But as the film continued, it just didn't make good on that promise, so quickly feeling insecure in it and instead fleeing to these kind of poorly executed sight gags and one-liners, which was made all the more frustrating because after that first scene, they didn't just completely abandon the Abby-Erin friend dynamic. They just mostly abandoned it. So each time I was about to forget how cool it would have been to really explore that dynamic, the film would lamely attempt to bring it back. And in a lot of ways, I felt that about pretty much every single character on this film. The Leslie Jones character, for example, had this great little introduction as this sweet, upbeat character who longed to connect with and be a help to this society that was constantly rushing by her, far too focused on themselves to stop or care. But after her first scene, that personality trait almost completely evaporated and was almost never utilized to complement the Ghostbusters team as a whole, which I guess I can't say is what a team movie is supposed to do because there are always brilliant exceptions, but it's at least a really solid way to go, bringing together all these distinctive personalities, ones that are quite often at odds with one another, and forcing them to work together, ultimately bettering not just the whole, but each individual part. Though the part that actually worked the least for me was actually Kate McKinnon, though in that case I actually blamed the direction more than her. She was just never pushed to ensure that her character really gelled with the rest of her supposed friends. Her and McCarthy's Abby especially, who were very clearly written to be this great little duo, so rarely felt like a pairing that would actually exist in reality. And her comedy too was just so random, bizarre, and crazy, quite often reminding me of Jim Carrey in an Ace Ventura film, which, to be clear, that kind of comedy from Jim Carrey and from Kate McKinnon can be incredibly funny, but here it almost always felt like she was going for the gag at the expense of anything relatable or cohesive with the rest of the film, which in some instances can sometimes work, and I think Chris Hemsworth's character really was a prime example of that, though I will also admit that some of this just comes down to taste in comedy, but Hemsworth's very understated, almost deadpan approach really did help me engage a lot more with his character. It just allowed me to believe that this guy really was that dumb and that someone like him would indeed speak, act, and respond in the ways that he did. Though there again was another example of a character who seemed like he could have some interesting growth and development, only to, at the end of the film, feel like, wow, most of that was just left on the cutting room floor. So for example, in the trailer, we saw him declaring to his friends that he was meant to be a Ghostbuster, but in the film itself, that specific moment was quite nearly the entire extent of that thought and desire. I should also say, even as Hemsworth provided some of the highlights and McKinnon some of the lowlights, the comedy as a whole in this film was just okay. So as I was watching it, I felt like, yes, a lot of these jokes and sight gags are kind of improvised, made up on the spot, and when improvisation is firing on all cylinders and they just find that sweet spot, it is so much fun to watch. So for example, on Bridesmaids and Spy, I'm sure some of the best moments were made up in the moment, and I did genuinely find myself laughing throughout both of those films. Here though, time and again, I saw what I call the fifth take doldrums, where the joke or sight gag isn't as fresh or spontaneous as it might be on takes 1 or 2, but neither is it as refined or tightened as it might be on takes 9 or 10, and really this entire script felt like it had that issue where it needed just a few more drafts to really get where it needed to go. And under that, I felt like another one of the issues were the ghosts that were neither all that humorous nor all that threatening, at least not in a way that ever made me concerned for our heroes or for the world being invaded by these apparitions. We just never got a sense that they really wanted much more than to slime on things or drive recklessly in vehicles, which certainly wasn't helped with the fact that our heroes always seemed to have just enough time for one more weapons/gadget test or just generally stand around and talk about the plot. So, at the end of the day, was this film worthy of all the hate that it's been receiving all these months leading up to its release? In my opinion, no. Very rarely do films actually deserve that level of hate. But, considering Paul Feig's filmography and the other brilliant work that we've seen from McCarthy, Wiig, McKinnon, and Jones, was it still a letdown? Definitely. So for all these reasons, I will give Ghostbusters a 2 out of 5. I would love to know what you guys thought of the film. Having seen it now, did it kind of live up to the anti-hype that it's been receiving? Definitely comment below and let me know. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.